Keep Your Head by Joy McNeill. The rain pelted down persistently onto the windscreen of the ambulance. Grant switched the wiper blades to full speed for a clearer view of the congested Auckland southern motorway in front of them. This was a typical scene played out many times over for the seasoned paramedic. Grant had worked with the ambulance service approximately 13 years, so he knew the closer they got to the crash site, the harder it would be for the stationary vehicles ahead of them to make enough room for the ambulance to get past. It didn't matter that another ambulance had already passed by the commuters, as they had all pulled back into their lanes once the first ambulance had gone through. Grant even attempted to use the shoulder of the road, but that was soon blocked off by several trucks that had pulled over to the railing. Despite the fact that the lights and siren were going, he had to plant his hand on the air horn several times to get cars to move over and give them enough space to proceed forward. Some days, the ambulance would be lucky enough to get a police highway patrol escort to clear their way, but today was not that day. The incident had happened within close proximity to the ambulance station, and theirs was the second emergency vehicle to respond to the call. Chloe sat in the passenger seat looking a little nervous. After her training, she had only been working 2 months for the ambulance service, and the description of the job listed on their mobile data terminal sounded serious. The information relayed on the screen advised them that there were several vehicles involved at this incident, including a school bus and an unknown number of patients. Even though there were numerous units responding to the call-out, that ambulance would be second on scene. Chloe reached over behind the driver's seat and pulled out a pair of latex gloves from the built-in compartment that stored them. She put on a small pair, wanting to be prepared to make a quick exit from the truck when they pulled up at their location. Grant gazed briefly over at his young partner. "You all good to go there, kiddo? Remember, we will take our instructions from the designated incident officer on the first truck. We'll only do the initial triage until the other crews arrive on scene, so you'll need to grab the triage kit and a few large dressings from the overhead locker. Also, don't forget to put on a helmet, high-vis jacket and some safety glasses, okay?" "Sure thing, Grant," Chloe answered cheerfully, trying to stay positive and keep a level head. Even with the adrenaline now racing through her veins and some of the best ambulance training in the world under her belt, this real-life call into an unknown situation of this magnitude was a daunting prospect for the newbie ambulance officer. A silent fear within her core became more intense when they finally arrived on scene and saw the carnage spread across the motorway in front of them. It appeared that a school bus and freight truck had clipped each other, sending both vehicles careering across all 3 lanes of the motorway. Crushed cars, loose metal, tyres and glass lay strewn across the road like scattered Lego pieces. The bus had come to rest on its side over the centre median barrier, and people who had not been trapped in their vehicles were mulling around, dazed and shaken in the pouring rain. Grant parked the ambulance in a safe area so that they could exit the scene quickly if need be. He then hit the locator button on the MDT screen. With what they needed in hand, the pair alighted from their truck to liaison with the first ambulance crew at the scene. Grant and Chloe slipped on the vest that read triage, while the duly appointed incident officer told them they had counted approximately 48 patients. He then asked Chloe to start triaging people on the left side of the road and Grant to take the right. "We have been informed there are 5 more ambulances on the way. Westpac Rescue is responding, and the MCI unit is coming from Mount Wellington," he quickly informed them before they hurried off to start the initial triage process. A woman yelled to them from the driver's seat of the nearest damaged vehicle, which was pinned firmly against the left side road barrier. "Hurry, my husband needs help." Chloe managed to open the back door of the car so she could reach over to the man and quickly assess his condition. When the car had been pushed against the barrier, he had hit his head with force upon the side window, but apart from a gash which was still oozing blood, he was conscious and breathing. Chloe gave the woman a trauma dressing and told her to apply pressure to her husband's wound. She then slipped a yellow tag onto his wrist and made to leave the car. "Where are you going?" the woman cried out in a panicked voice. "I have a lot of other patients to assess. Your husband will be attended to when we have more staff on site. Keep that pressure on his wound, and someone will be with you as soon as they are able." "But—" Chloe didn't have time to argue with the woman. She smiled at her reassuringly and hurried off towards the next car. On the right side of the road, Grant had already checked 2 cars, and he was heading for the school bus. He hesitated for a second to check his safety. He didn't want to get too close to the vehicle if it was unstable and likely to move. However, the bus was pinned firmly onto the barrier, and there was no way it was budging in either direction. Someone had activated the emergency door at the side of the vehicle, and some of the high school-aged passengers had managed to scramble their way out. Grant methodically started working his way quickly through the group of distressed teens. Thankfully, most of them were given a green triage tag, delayed care, to place upon their wrists. Sadly, the same could not be said for the passengers inside the bus. There were cries of pain and low moaning from all quarters. Grant knew he had to remain focused and work his way methodically along the row of seats. As heartless as it sounded, he knew at least the patients who were making sound had a clear airway and were breathing. The first 2 teenagers Grant came upon looked as though they had died instantly upon impact when the bus had hit the road barrier. The paramedic wasted no time in placing white tags on the pair before moving on to the next row of seats. The girl in the seat looked up at Grant with pain and fear in her eyes as he bent down to place a yellow tag about her wrist. "Someone will be with you soon, sweetie. Hang in there," he stated in a calm, reassuring tone. He pulled a trauma dressing from his pocket and placed it on her open leg wound. He told her to put her hand over the pad and hold it firmly in place. The girl in the adjoining seat was making low gurgling sounds and remained unresponsive to Grant's voice, and she quickly received a red tag. Thankfully, before he arrived at the 3rd row of seats, there were voices behind him at the emergency exit. 2 more ambulance officers with triage vests boarded the bus to help him assess their patients. Grant was the first officer to reach their last patient. The bus driver lay slumped sideways against the smashed window and the concrete barrier. Grant couldn't reach far enough to feel for her carotid pulse, so he gently pulled at the patient's clothing to try and bring her closer to him. Even for the seasoned paramedic, what happened next made him feel quite nauseous. The woman's body came upright, however that was all that came away, because she had been decapitated. Grant quickly released his grip from her jersey and tied a white tag to her wrist before he picked his way back through the bus and jumped down onto the road. The rain was still falling steadily while Grant went to see how his partner was faring. He had felt a little guilty leaving the newbie to her own devices at such a major incident, but he had partnered with Chloe on a number of shifts over the past few months, and she seemed a capable young woman. When he caught up with her, the young ambulance officer had just finished placing a green tag around the truck driver's wrist. Apart from being extremely shaken by the incident, he seemed fine. All good, Chloe?" Grant asked. "Yep, all good. What's next?" "We'll head back to the operations manager with the information we have and see where they want us placed next." The pair headed up the road towards the newly established MCI command post. The crash site was now swarming with emergency personnel from all 3 services. The fire department were busy placing chocks under the vehicles that had the potential to move. This job was done before cutting operations could commence for those trapped in their vehicles. They also included the bus, even though Grant had deemed it safe enough to enter a short while before. As they passed the first car Chloe had attended earlier, the woman yelled over to them hysterically, "Come here, my husband's dying. You can't just walk away and leave him to die." Grant followed Chloe over to the car while she rechecked the patient's condition. The man was still breathing, but he was unresponsive when spoken to. Grant handed Chloe a red triage tag to replace the yellow one upon the patient's wrist. The fire department will be with you shortly to get your husband out. Hang in there. We are just sorting out the rescue and treatment of everyone with the command post. Your husband is now an immediate patient, so will be seen to first along with the other red tags, Grant said calmly, trying to appease the distressed woman. As they walked away, she swore after them and started crying uncontrollably. It was gut-wrenching for the pair to leave the woman so distressed, but they had a set procedure to follow, and her husband was not the only person in need of immediate assistance. Grant looked down at Chloe, who was trying to hold back tears with a pained expression on her face. Take a deep breath, kiddo, and keep your mind on the job. We have to keep our wits about us. There will be time enough to release your emotions later. Now is not the time, nor the place. Chloe quickly wiped away the tear that had formed in the corner of her eye and tried to refocus. She felt foolish for getting emotional when it was not her decision how the incident was handled. She was just one of many emergency workers, and the job needed to be played out correctly, otherwise chaos would reign supreme. Once they arrived back at the operations area, the pair were told to change their vests to the ones labelled treatment. Ian, a senior officer, told them and the designated transport officer what they needed to do next. Grant, I want you and your partner to start working on the priority 1 patients as they arrive at the allocated treatment station. Wayne, once they are stabilised, we need to start transporting them as quickly as possible. The Westpac chopper will be here shortly to take the first salvageable red tag patient to Auckland Hospital. Because of the close proximity, we will load the first few ambulances to transport to Middlemore, then Auckland and North Shore have been put on standby. We all clear on that? Grant and Wayne nodded in reply to the senior officer and quickly set off into their respective designated areas. Firstly, though, Grant and Chloe grabbed the gear they needed from the ambulance to start treating the incoming patients. The first person just so happened to be the woman's husband. She stared at Chloe coldly while they set about stabilising her husband. Grant inserted an IV lure and intubated the man, who was now deeply unconscious, while Chloe placed a dressing over the man's head wound. Just before the Westpac flight crew arrived to take him to the chopper, the woman turned and said coldly to Chloe, "If he dies, I'm going to hold you accountable." Grant quickly intervened. He knew Chloe felt upset about the way in which the woman had labelled her with guilt. He understood the woman was upset and shocked at what had happened, but he also needed his young partner to remain focused on the job. "You are quite within your rights to make a formal complaint, madam. However, you must remember that we have orders to follow. Everything that could be done for your husband in this difficult situation has been achieved. We wish him a speedy recovery." No sooner was the man stretchered away than more patients cut free from the wreckage started arriving on the large coloured mat that had been placed on the roadside. Thankfully, the rain had finally stopped, and a doctor and several other skilled ambulance personnel had joined them to clear the red tag patients. Time flew, so what had seemed like only half an hour was almost 2 hours by the time all the patients had been dealt with. They were then sent off to the respective medical facilities, bagged, or the police arranged for the lucky ones to get home after their harrowing ordeal. The fire department had cleared the road of debris, and the police opened one lane so that the huge backlog of stranded commuters could finally make their way past the crash site. All ambulance staff were told they would be advised of a time and place for a debriefing, and everyone left the site exhausted but relieved the incident had been well managed. All ambulance officers involved with the Multi Casualty Incident joined together for the debrief meeting that followed. There was a quiet sense of anticipation amongst those gathered, with senior management and a psychologist. It was the first debriefing Chloe had been to, and she sat holding her hands together and shuffling her feet nervously. She had felt horrid ever since the woman from the car had threatened her. Now as she looked up at the senior officer. She didn't know what to say or how to tell him that she felt traumatized by the whole experience. Grant sat next to her, looking cool, calm and collected, while he tapped softly on the notepad before him. Once the senior officer had spoken to them about the incident from a management point of view, he asked the group for their thoughts and perspective as to how the job had gone. Chloe put up her hand, somewhat reluctantly, to speak. I'd like to say something. I felt I'd let my patient down by not staying with him. I understand the role of triage, but would it not be better to let different teams work in different areas, triage each vehicle as a team and stabilize the patients as you go, rather than walking away? She then went on to explain about the woman and how distressed she had been, and that she was looking at laying a complaint against Chloe. The senior officer was just about to reply to her when Grant abruptly butted in. Chloe, I told the patient's wife what the situation was. That should be an end to it. Given your training, you should be well aware that we have a set way of handling such situations. You're making a mountain out of a molehill is really neither here nor there. Management's not going to change their procedures to please you because you can't handle one highly distressed person swearing at you. Chloe turned to face Grant with a shocked expression and tears in her eyes. Well, if I can't have my say, I may as well not be here, she answered indignantly as she pulled her chair back and stood up. Right. I'd like to speak to both of you privately now, thank you, the senior station officer said with a firm tone of voice as he pointed to the office adjoining the conference room. When the three were alone, with the door closed to prying eyes and ears, the senior officer let rip. That outburst was totally uncalled for, Grant. Yes, we have set procedures to abide by, but to bawl your partner out in front of the rest of the team is out of line. There is no need to lose your head in such a manner. We are here to help and encourage our new officers. What happened next in that closed room was something no one would want to witness, but it happens the world over for people who work in a stressful environment. The senior officer had no idea that the words he had just used would trigger a gut-wrenching feeling of total hopelessness deep within the paramedic's mind. Grant sunk to the ground, his head bent forward in his hands as he wept uncontrollably. The mere words, "No need to lose your head," brought back a clear vision of the headless bus driver for the medic, and in that instant Grant lost all will to carry on. "I can't do it anymore. I quit," he repeated over and over again in totally broken man. This story is written for all emergency personnel suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. You are not forgotten. The end.